Mark. All right. Well, I hope I did not get people here under false pretenses with the title of this, Evergreen Roses, because we're going to be talking about rose family members. Although our roses in the garden right now really do still have their leaves. By the end of the week, maybe not. So we're going to talk about this huge family, and this whole year we're kind of celebrating the enjoyment of the garden. Roses in particular, our yearly theme, Stop and Smell Roses, because we are in the midst of construction of a new rose garden, which is always exciting to have a new, a really wholly new garden like this that's coming in. I want to mention that Chris talked about our winter symposium, Stop and Smell the Roses, and it is good. I just want to mention real quickly how fantastic the program is going to be. Bryce is always wonderful. He's going to be really talking about how to really enjoy your garden, how to get the most out of it. That kind of sense of inner peace that you get through the connection with the land. But then John Dole, our department head, who is one of the world experts on cut stem production in the world. He's a real authority. He's going to be talking about cut roses and kind of. They show up on Valentine's Day, they get delivered, but where they come from, it's really fascinating. How they're produced, what's done. It is really fascinating. I've had a chance to see some of the production in Ecuador, and it's amazing what's being done to produce those cut stems. Those perfectly straight, perfectly in bud flowers, and it's kind of a peek behind the curtain, the florist industry. And then the final speaker, our keynote speaker, Bill McNamara. He's spoken here before. He's the director of Quarry Hill Botanic Garden, which is a garden that does exclusively wild collected Asian material in the wine country of California. It's a tough job. But he and I have talked for many years about roses, wild collected roses, and he's been really focusing on that on a rose garden that's going to be unlike any other rose garden, where it's really all about the wild roses that are around Asia, and it's such a diverse genus, and really quite a bit different than a lot of our modern, really hybridized roses. So I think it's going to be a fantastic lecture. And Bill McNamara he's a pleasure to listen to. He is deeply thoughtful, and really I'm excited to get him. That's, I get to, put in my plugs for the people we get in to talk, and I'm really excited about that because I really enjoy hearing him speak. So, we get into the roses. Rose family is one of those really large families that are quite different. Really a diverse group. Everything from large timber trees to herbaceous ground covers. Really, kind of everything fits into this group. So it's really hard to generalize about it, but it's great when you want to talk about the family because there's so many that you can talk about it. We don't often think about how many of our fruit crops are in the rose family, but all of our apples and peaches, plums, cherries, loquats. We'll look at strawberries are all in the rose family. So it really is an important group for us. And then obviously ornamentally, it's incredibly important. And so I'm trying to, with these plants, we're going to be talking about this family and related things to roses, several times over the course of the year to really get a sense of how interesting the group is. We'll jump right into it. I hope my voice makes it through. I had a couple of talks this morning in Greensboro and then raced back here for this. So I think I'm going to make it back. I didn't sing with my radio on the way back there. my voice. As always, if you have questions or comments, observations, please add them while we're talking about the plants. I'm loving when people disagree with me because we all have different experiences in the garden, and we all learn more that way. All right, so we're gonna get going. Start with a real common ornamental plant. Our first plant, a little bit off the path there, but I think you can see it. I'm gonna pull my cheat sheet out to get the correct cultivar name. This is Rafflepis indica SPG-3-003. You are more likely to find it under the name Redbird Indian hawthorn. The trade name is Redbird. And this is a brand new plant. It's just on the market. I'm not sure if it was released last year or if this year will be the first year it's actually released. Rafflepis indica, the Indian hawthorns, are really popular plants. Nice evergreen flowering shrubs. I used to garden on the coast of Virginia, and these plants are ubiquitous because they're extremely salt spray tolerant plants, which is useful. Evergreen plants that will tolerate salt spray. Not as big a problem here. They have a reputation. They were used really widely and then kind of went out of fashion a little bit because they are susceptible to a lot of disease problems, and that's a factor in a lot of the rose family. There are quite a few disease problems, some insect problems that can plague a lot of the plants in the family. Redbird, we haven't grown it very long. Like I said, it's brand new. It is supposedly much more leaf spot resistant than other Rafflepis. The two main species you typically see are Rafflepis indica, the true Indian hawthorn, and Rafflepis umbellata, which is tends to have a rounder leaf, a little bit thicker textured, glossier leaf, and then there's some hybrids as well between the two. Redbird was especially selected for the bright red new growth. Now we're seeing a little bit of that now, but really in the spring you get this burst of just almost covering it with burgundy red new growth. And then white flowers. Flower color in Indian hawthorns ranges from white to pink. These have pretty solidly white flowers on top of the red foliage, which is quite nice. I'm not sure the ultimate height of this. Rafflepis indica can get quite big. Just looking at the growth habit, I think it's going to be a fairly large shrub. They do take pruning very well. Now, when you prune plants hard, if you want to keep this plant 2 feet tall, from front of your bay window, and you're pruning it all the time, that new soft growth is what's really susceptible to leaf spot and other diseases. So you're better off putting plants in a place where they can develop in a little bit more of a natural shape, doing less pruning to keep them going, especially with plants in the rose family. Sun. Great question. Rafflepis indica will grow in pretty heavy shade. It will just be thin and open and won't flower, and so you probably won't enjoy it there. The more sun you get, the denser it's going to be, the heavier flowering it's going to be. So that really helps. It is very drought tolerant once established. Very, very drought tolerant once established. Other questions?
Best way to treat leaf spot?
Best get a different plant. Leaf spot, it's a fungal disease. If you've looked at the biology of fungi, they are more closely related to us than a lot of insects and other diseases. And so the chemicals you spray for fungal control are nasty chemicals. And the more you can stay away from those, the better for your own health, for the health of the environment. Sulfur, if you have a plant and you can't bear to get rid of it, sulfur is a pretty good organic solution for fungal diseases. But once your leaf has that leaf spot, that spot's there. It's never going away. And when you have an evergreen plant, that can be, it can make a plant look fairly ugly. If you have a plant that is really highly susceptible to diseases like that, get rid of it and get another one. There are so many plants out there, and if you've had that plant for several years, you've gotten the 30 or 40 bucks, at most probably, that you spend on it. You spend more than that taking 2 people to the movies and getting popcorn. So buy another plant that'll last you for quite a few years.
Does the plant get berries from the flowers?
Thank you. I didn't mention that. Yes, Rafflepis indica will get little kind of blue-black fruits on there. The foliage often tends to grow beyond that, so they don't always show up really well. This one I don't know about. Haven't seen the fruit on it. Some forms fruit better than others. Some forms display the fruit better. It hasn't been a big selling point in any of the descriptions I've seen, so my guess is it's not going to be a really showy fruiting plant.
Is this plant at all related to the hawthorn that you read about in that's in the English hedgerows, or is that an entirely different plant?
That they are related. The true hawthorns, Crataegus species, genus, is in the rose family. So they are related. They're in the same family, but visually nothing alike. The true hawthorns are shrubs or trees, often thorny. A lot of them native to the U.S. Usually with white flowers, although there's some really nice pink flower ones, and red fruits, red or orange small fruits. Really showy in fruit. They are just thousands and thousands and thousands of them, it seems like. One of the great botanists, Sargent, Charles Sprague Sargent from up at the Arnold Arboretum, kind of went off the deep end with hawthorns. He found a hill where he described something like 60 different species on it. You know, it's one of those plants that you can just start splitting up by, you know, the lobings on the leaf and how the calyx is on the fruit and all these kind of things, and really kind of go overboard with them. Or you can lump them all together and say, you know, we have 10 species in the U.S. or we have 90. You know, it's kind of up to you how they get them. Other questions?
So which plant is the one you're pointing out?
This one right here, this little evergreen shrub.
And how tall will it get?
Not certain. Haven't grown it long enough, and I never trust the literature. You know, a good rule of thumb is twice whatever the literature says. Based on the growth habit, I think it's probably going to get to be at least you know, in normal landscape time, an 8-foot by 8-foot shrub. That's my guess. I may be completely off. We'll watch it for a while.
Are they ever pruned into like small trees or?
Yeah, we'll actually look at some that have been pruned up.
Not on this lecture, but what is this gorgeous thing right here?
This is a willow. This is Salix flame, the flame willow.
Wow.
And you can see the trunk. We cut it back every year or two. It puts out this new growth, which is incredibly beautiful.
It is.
If you come to our propagation workshop, this is one of those plants that's really, that's a good one to propagate. And,
Okay.
you can take cuttings and get one for yourself. Cool. Get a whole bunch of them.
But the other one is too.
Yeah, the rafflepis, yeah,
Yep.
that does good. If you propagate it, don't sell it because it is a protected plant. So. Next one on the list is the Japanese loquat. And it's this pyramidal, large shrub, small tree right here. You can see it is a winter flowering plant. It's got loads of buds on there, a few that are opening up. We will see how the buds fare after this the cold weather this week. Loquats are have been popular landscape plants in the deep south for a long time. I have a lot of family in Florida and Louisiana, and this is one of those plants that I kind of always grew up with it on my radar. Some forms have a really dense, rusty kind of fuzz on the leaves, tops and bottoms. This particular one does not have a lot of that. Collected this in Taiwan. It was actually an escape from a cultivated plant at what used to be a working farm. Now it's kind of a resort farm up in the mountains. And it kind of got it on a whim, brought it back, and it has since, as we've been growing it, we've been really impressed with the hardiness of it. They're kind of iffy in zone 7. Some forms a little hardier than others. This one in our 7-degree temperatures last year had no problems at all. We didn't get damage. Flower buds, but the foliage itself wasn't hurt. So kind of made us pay a little more attention to it. So we're going to be keeping an eye out on it, and if it continues to show that, and as we propagate it, we'll send it out to some people in some even colder climates, see how it fares for them, and see if it really is proven to be hardier than the typical form that's grown. If the winter flowers don't get damaged by the cold, They form little fruits which are edible. They're in good forms they're very delicious, and bad forms they're okay, but not bad. Little orange fruits which they're beautiful on the tree, but also very nice. Really stout, kind of a coarse plant. You see the young stems are very thick, thick leathery leaves. This particular form really glossy, like I said, we like. Tends to grow kind of pyramidal when young, often it's limbed up, and you'll get kind of an umbrella-shaped head over time. It will spread out, won't stay a real nice pyramid like that.
How tall?
They'll grow to typically about 15 feet or so. They don't get very large. I'm sure there are much larger ones somewhere, but most of what I've seen are in the 15 to 18 foot range, full-grown ones.
What's their range? Will most of them make it into this 7 feet?
Yeah, no, not really. Zone 7 is kind of where you really start getting a lot of damage. They will grow. Many of the loquats will grow for many, many years in Zone 7 if we have mild winters. We have a real Zone 7 winter like we had last year, you start getting a lot of damage. Now, if it's been established, gotten pretty large, it's often okay. You just get a lot of leaf dying and it'll flush back out, tip death, but it'll flush back out. But this one just showed no damage at all at 7 degrees, which really impressed us.
So it's a young tree?
This is a young tree. It was seed in 2008. So,
seed? From seed in 2008?
And they grow prolific from seeds. So when it drops its fruit,
yeah,
you can get lots of little trees.
You can wind up with a lot of trees. They don't move around, so it isn't a problem with them escaping. But yeah, you can get a lot of seedlings growing underneath your trees.
Now, are there seedlings at the base, or is it multi-trunk?
Ours is it's suckered from the base.
Okay.
Now, often people you take those out and kind of limit up. We leave them there because we are in that transition zone. That we feel like that helps protect it a little bit. If we did have a really cold winter, it really knocked it back, some of those suckers may be able to come out. It's very fragrant. I'll pass that around. People haven't smelled it. It's a very fragrant plant. So if you get it, and often we'll get it to flower before it gets cold enough to kill the flower buds. So it's worth growing for that. Other questions?
Yeah. Nice.
All
Is
right.
it full sun?
Full sun for good flowering and fruit production. Although with some high shade, under a pine or woodland like we have in a lot of Raleigh, you get a little bit extra protection, and they'll grow very nicely in shade. And when you get glossy forms like this, they kind of reflect the light and are kind of nice out in a woodland garden. But flowering and fruiting is reduced.
Credit for it.
Okay, next one on the list is kind of a low one over here. Those of you on that side may not even be able to see it really. It's a Rubus rolfi, and I was kind of almost standing on Rubus rolfi over where I was talking about the plant. We'll have more up here that we're going by, and this is one of the brambles, a blackberry, the Rubus, another fruit that's in the rose family, the blackberries and raspberries. Rubus rolfi is a great ground covering plant. It's been confused, name's been confused in the trade. You usually never see it as Rubus rolfi. You see it as Rubus pentaloba or Rubus calicinoides. Calicinoides is an invalid name, and Rubus pentaloba is another species that's very similar looking. I don't know if it's in the U.S. or not, but it's a larger leaf and more of a kind of a cascading shrubby plant, whereas Rubus rolfi is a true ground cover. Come over right now. Give it a second or two. The typical clone you see is called green carpet, and it doesn't flower very well, and it doesn't fruit. And I had always been told when it does fruit, it's insipid. It's not a very good fruit. It's really, you just grow it as a ornamental ground cover. You don't worry about the fruit. Well, we collected it and we planted out a bunch of seedlings, and we get loads of fruit out here. Bright orange raspberry fruits, orange blackberries. that are really good. When they start ripening, our interns, you know, start grazing on them out here. I think Chris made a pie out of them one year.
We made a pie at home. It was pretty tasty, but the color kind of set you off a little bit.
Yeah, it is orange. So I'm not sure if that's a case of we've got better clone, or it's just because we've got a bunch of seedlings, so our genetics are we have a wider diversity of genetics, which leads to cross pollination and fruiting. But really quite nice. And in the winter, it goes from kind of a real quilted deep green to burgundy color, which can kind of fade into the mulch you have. Now this particular one is one called Sonia's Parasol, and it's a little hard to see now that it's gone into its winter coloration, but you can see on some of this, you've got where we've got this kind of pinkish red streaking on here. This is a variegated plant. It's a little splashed irregularly with some white, and then when it gets that purple coloration in the winter, that white gets a real nice pink. Stands out a little bit more during the summer though. It's been fairly stable. There is a gold form of Rubus rolfi that's out there that is a terrible grower. I have killed more of it in the nursery than I can shake a stick at. It's really difficult to keep alive in pots. I'm told it's a little bit better in the landscape, but I've killed it in the landscape as well. So I don't know about that.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah.
I have a stunning golden leaf one at home that is grown very admirably, and I have to whack it back continuously, and
well,
has done outstandingly well, but has never had a single flower on it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you have to bring us some, so we can plant.
Give that one a try.
Give it another try.
Okay.
Get out of the nursery quicker. But it does spread. It does root at the nodes, so it's very good for erosion control. It grows in sun or shade. If it gets really bitterly cold, it can defoliate. You can lose a lot of leaves, and it's a little slow coming back the next season. It's actually quicker if you cut it back pretty hard if it does that and let it resprout. But even when it does that, since it has rooted throughout and you've got the roots there, it does hold soil pretty well. So it's a good kind of erosion control plant in the garden. Since it is so low, we haven't had problems with it spreading by birds eating it, that sort of thing. It just hasn't been a problem. Now it spreads fast in the garden, which is great for a ground cover. Probably not ideal for a townhouse type courtyard garden, because it can be very, very quick. It will tolerate some foot traffic, so it's good for an area where there's occasionally going in. Okay, next plant is Waldstenia lobata, which is sometimes called barren strawberry, the Waldstenias. It's a ground covering plant, and you can, if you're familiar with strawberries, you can see why it's called. It's got strawberry in the common name. It's very, very similar. This particular one, the leaves aren't, on a strawberry, they're trifoliate. You have 3 leaflets. This one is lobed, hence lobata, so it's not really 3 different leaflets. Kind of a fuzzy leaf. Really a nice evergreen though. It stays, typically doesn't get damaged even when you get pretty cold weather, so it stays pretty nice. Flowers on Waldstenia can be a nice small gold to kind of a creamy yellow that's not real visible. Fruit is you'll never notice the fruit on there at all unless you really get down there and look at your plants closely. But it makes a really dense, small-scale ground cover. It doesn't run really far like the Rubus rolfi that I showed. It is dense and tight. You can see you're not going to have weed problems coming up through that. Stays looking good all year round. So it really is a nice plant, especially if you want to just cover up a small area. Now, you can plant a lot of it and cover up a big area, but it is going to kind of slowly spread. Now, this one was, let's see. Okay, so this we planted from a gallon pot in spring of 2013. So it's got, not quite 18 months, not quite 2 years, 18 months of growing to do that. And that's not bad. That's, a 2-foot wide patch. So that's pretty respectable.
Foot traffic?
Pardon?
Foot traffic.
Foot traffic, It will take some foot traffic, but the one of the big things with foot traffic is on that Rubus, you know, the leaves are held close to the stem. You can step on them, just kind of press them down. With this, since you have longer petioles, you can break those petioles, and then that leaf dies. So it won't kill the plant, but it can disfigure it more if you have some foot traffic. But great for planting around you know, stepping stones and things. And it's native. I didn't mention that. It is native, so native ground covers can be hard to come by.
Oh, yes. And
it really prefers some shade. I imagine with adequate moisture, it would be fine in full sun. But you typically see it as more of a part shade to pretty full, heavily shaded area is where it seems to grow best. May grow a little quicker in a moist, sunnier spot, but yeah, it really does well in shade. And kind of average in terms of water needs. It's not, I wouldn't call it a drought tolerant plant. May survive, but not look very good during real droughty conditions. Cherry laurels, Prunus laurocerasus. Now these are very, very popular landscape plants. What you see mostly in commercial landscapes are the cultivars Shipkinensis, I may be getting that wrong, but something like that, and autolichen cherry laurels. Those are lower, more spreading plants. They're great for big commercial sites where you're planting hundreds of them. Typical, more typical of the species is upright, really a large, bold shrub. Now, Prunus is a huge genus in the rose family. That's where we get all of our cherries and peaches and both flowering and fruiting cherries. So a lot going on there. Plums, a lot of things. But then there are also some great natives like Prunus serratina and Prunus virginiana, and some really nice evergreen plants like Prunus laurocerasus. This is a variety macrophyllus, large leaf. And you can see it's a large leaf. If you've seen cherry laurels, typically the leaf is about half that size. It can have some real, a much finer texture than this, although it's always a bit coarse. Really like this large leaf form, really glossy foliage, really almost like a magnolia in terms of the leaf. Gets that big upright oval shape, great for blocking a view of your neighbor, something like that. New growth, pretty stout, a little bit green as you go up towards the top. After this cold, we'll probably get a little bit of damage on this. That seems to be pretty typical. But it'll sail through. It won't be too damaged by it. Also on the list, you can see behind over here is one called Batumi rubis, which was introduced by the Arboretum. That's one that Todd Lassane collected in the Republic of Georgia, not the state of Georgia, but the Republic of Georgia, near Batumi, that was being bred for fruit production, and so it gets fairly large-sized, bright red fruits. It has not fruited great for us every year, but when it does fruit, it is a knockout. So on Prunus laurocerasus, you get spikes of small white flowers, and then followed by fruits that go from red to black, typically smaller, but Batumi rubis is much larger. You can see the difference in kind of the cold hardiness of the two. You can see Batumi rubis has lost quite a few leaves with the cold that we've had, whereas this variety, macrophyllus, has kept leaves, stayed pretty dense down to the ground.
Does this one have, the macrophyllus have fruit as well that can be
Yeah, it has. They're smaller. And it's not really, I don't know how close they were in the Republic of Georgia to getting them edible, but they hadn't gotten there with the Batumi rubis. They're not good. There's work to do, so I would not recommend eating them.
Don't get it.
But the birds like them, right?
The birds like them, yes.
And sun or shade or both?
Can go in sun or shade. It's got some issues. Cherry laurels, especially some of those lower, flatter growing ones that the industry really loves, have issues with some shot hole diseases where you'll get little holes all through the leaves. It can really disfigure plants. When you're growing them singly, doesn't seem to be such a problem, but when you're massing 50, 100 of them, you can it leads to more problems, and it's more prone to that in shade.
How tall do you think they get?
Well, the species, if allowed to grow, they can get quite tall, 20, 25 feet. They'll tolerate pruning very well, so you can keep them smaller. It'll take them a long time to get to a 25-foot plant, but they can get that large.
So this foliage does look clean. So they're not alone. They're not like susceptible to.
Alone?
Because I've seen
Yeah.
They're a mess.
Yeah, the autolichens, where they're usually planted is
Like a
a
hedge.
whole mass of them, a hedge or a whole bank in front of a building where there's not a lot of air circulation. Often they stay, they're shaded and they stay moist, and you have all these conditions, between having lots of a susceptible plant host, the massing them, having the conditions right where there's not a lot of wind, it's not open, it stays damper, that when you get the disease in there, it can really flourish. When you put them out in the open where you got nice breeze, a lot of sunlight, so the foliage dries, you don't have as much of a problem. Now we have had nurserymen here who are they come up and they say, I want you to help me find the next autolichen cherry laurel. And so, the nursery industry and people kind of persist in this thinking of, we got to find the next really good plant, when really what we should be doing is getting more of a diversity out there, and that really helps a lot. But even if you planted these in a hedge, if they're getting some wind movement around them, I think you'd be fine with them. I don't think it'd be a problem. Other questions or thoughts? See, nice and breezy out here. What?
Where do you buy the big leaf ones? Are they in the market?
You can get this through sometimes through mail order specialty places. I know locally Camellia Forest has had it. I know that Taylor's Nursery in the past has grown it. I don't know if they still do. You can take the propagation class and learn to propagate it. They do root pretty easily. For something with that thick of a stem, they do root okay. But I did want to point it out because it is looking so evergreen, and so this is part of what we love to do. This is a crab apple, Malus. Same genus as the true apples, Malus. This is an unknown species. It was collected not by us but by somebody on the West Coast as a maple in Taiwan. I'm not quite sure how that, I have not spoken to the person. We got it through another nursery, and that's what they said about it. I don't know how you would collect it as a maple. If you collected the plant, the leaves on this are alternate and the maple is opposite, and anybody collecting plants should know at least that much. If you collect the fruit, obviously a crabapple and the maple samaras are a fair bit different. So I throw my hands up at that. We started growing it because the nurseryman who gave it to us said it was looking pretty interesting to him, and knew we had been to Taiwan several times, was asking us about it. It does not, as yet, it does not key out to either of the two native crab apples from Taiwan, so we're really not sure what it is at all. But we're hopefully it'll flower and fruit, and we can figure it out. But we love these mysteries. Now, the foliage on this has been really clean. Crab apples can get a lot of fungal diseases, a lot of problems. Foliage has been really clean, and it has stayed, really tried to stay evergreen for us. So, it made it through the winter last winter. Did get some damage. Often these plants that stay evergreen, that are typically deciduous, that means they're really tender and won't tolerate the cold. So it's going to be interesting for us to watch this plant, see how evergreen it actually is, see what it does, see when it flowers and fruits if it's a showy plant, see what the habit is. Right now it's kind of shrubby. We may propagate this and try and grow it up more as a tree and see what it does. But really it's one of those plants that right now just kind of has us scratching our heads all about it. Hopefully with flowers and fruit we'll be able to narrow down what exactly it is. It is a crab apple, that I can say. It is Malus for sure. but I'm amazed that in beginning of January it looks like this. It looks fantastic.
Is the burgundy color only in the winter?
Question was the burgundy, and you can see in some of the spots, you can see right here and over here, you got really nice dark burgundy. That's you get a little of that in the new growth, but where it's all down the stem, that seems to be more of a winter response.
And is it sun?
Yeah, all crab apples are going to prefer more sun.
Do you expect it to get really tall?
I don't know what to expect. You know, most of the crab apples are, you know, smaller flowering trees, so that's kind of what I'm expecting. But apples can get large, so it may get larger. I don't know.
Did you say it was deciduous last year? It was not.
When it got really cold, it got deciduous. So yeah, we'll see. You know, by the end of next week, it may be crispy brown and not very happy. We don't know yet. We've mentioned a couple times that our theme for 2015 is stop and smell the roses. And part of that's really to get people to enjoy the garden. A lot of gardeners get caught up in the gardening part of it and forget that, you know, they should be enjoying both their garden and the gardening process, because gardening is a process, not an end result. But we're also doing it to celebrate our new rose garden, which construction should be finished by the end of the month, and we'll start getting into planting shortly thereafter. We're going to be, we've already removed the old rose garden. We're going to be starting all new out here where we have lots of sun, lots of good air circulation out here. Make this kind of, we're looking at this as the anchor for this expansion, this 2-acre expansion we did of the Arboretum. With some really nice hardscaping, bluestone paths, iron arbors. Really going to be a beautiful garden space, and really designed to be a year-round garden with some, you know, evergreen structure to complement the roses when they're in flower, and to provide some structure when the roses, you know, during this time of year when the roses are not at their peak. So very excited. It's moving along quickly. You can see the path kind of system, an oval with entrance on either side. There'll be an arbor, a Gothic arch down in front of where the skid steer is, and the main entrance will be right through, kind of in line where the old rose garden was, right down that center pathway.
Is there a water feature or walkway around? It looks round.
Yeah, there's a walkway around it. There's a walkway straight through, and then an oval walkway. Not a water feature in here, but like I said, it'll be really nice hardscaping, and then it'll be great plants. Right now, you know, the paths look really wide. They'll come in a little bit, and we'll have lots of room for for roses, which will be the feature, but then also herbaceous plants to complement the roses. Different places. Ideally, we get North Carolina grown roses, but we spent pretty much all our money on the construction. So you know, we rely on the kindness of strangers. But we have good friends in the nursery industry, so we're getting roses from quite a few different places. A lot of very new things for us to trial, like we do with all our plants out here, and then also some really tried and true roses that we want to make sure people know to grow.
So what's being done with the old rose garden? It's back here, right?
Go look at it.
I know. So is there any plans for it?
Yeah, the plans for that area, there'll be an entry garden kind of on the other side of this path into that area. And then it'll be a smaller open space with a gazebo at the other end that'll provide space for programs, especially children's programs outside. There's a lot of times where, you know, if we have some rain, we have to cancel because our indoor space is rented out. So the gazebo will provide space for to go outside, or when it's really hot and sunny, to have programs out there, and then some open space for more programming. Also provide space for weddings. You know, that's a good source of income for us. A pretty low impact on the Arboretum source of income, so that'll do that. That whole area we still need to raise money for. If anybody would like a pavilion named for them, come speak to me after the tour, and we'll see what we can do. But yeah, I think once these two pieces are connected, it'll provide kind of a really nice. You know, we have our main border there with a really nice straight path. This will be a nice perpendicular to that. That'll carry you through and bring you into this space. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to be talking about the tree that's the evergreen plant that's above me, not this right beside me. This is another Indian hawthorn, rafflepis. It's often listed as indica. I think that's what I put on your paper. It's probably X. delacorii, the hybrid between indica and umbellata. That wider leaf, that thicker texture really looks like more the hybrid. Put this on here. This is a really old one, Rosalinda. Beautiful, big clusters of pink flowers. But to give you an idea of the size that rafflepis can get, and it was somebody asked about it pruning up into a tree. This is one that's only recently really been pruned up into a tree. You can see one, this big one over here, same thing, Rosalinda, that's been pruned up into a tree, which is unfortunately falling over, and probably is going to need to go. So you can see they make really actually very nice trees if you let them grow big. Now most of the breeding has been centered on getting them smaller and smaller and smaller, so you can plant out 50 of them in front of an office building where they will get lots of disease problems because they're crowded in together. But in terms of a flowering tree, it's hard to beat some of these older, larger rafflepis. When you have them, when you're not massing them all together, they tend to be more disease resistant. And Rosalinda is an old one that has proven to be one of the very best in terms of fungal disease resistance, and incredible when it's in flower with big clusters of pinkish white flowers.
Fragrant?
I have not smelled it. It doesn't have a fragrance to me, but I have a terrible sense of smell. Anybody else? rafflepis?
And what about sun or shade?
Sun, you get the most, you get fastest growth, most flowers on there, densest growth. But you can see this is kind of part shaded. During the summer when this is all leafed out, you get a fair amount of shade over here, and it does just fine. Still flowers. It'll be heaviest in full sun though.
When does it bloom?
When does it bloom? In kind of mid-spring, mid to late spring.
The berries?
Yeah, blue-black fruits.
Flowers,
yeah.
I mean, for the birds again? Yeah, the birds again?
I don't know that birds eat rafflepis fruit. There's very little flesh on them. They're kind of a larger seed. I mean, a thin flesh over the center, and somebody maybe can tell me different. I've never noticed birds eating them. Doesn't seem like there'd be a lot there. Other questions? All right, a little bit crowded here, but I'll try and make sure everybody can hear me. So our next plant, Cotoneaster franchetii. The Cotoneasters are a pretty popular landscape plant, especially a little farther north or west where it gets a bit colder. A lot of what we see are the low-growing ones, Cotoneaster horizontalis, rock spray Cotoneasters that are low-spreading plants. And a lot of those can have some real problems with fire blight, which is can be a bad disease on rose family plants. But there are a whole group of larger leafed, larger growing Cotoneasters that you see in European gardens, sometimes pruned up as trees with really nice kind of softly elegant domed heads. Occasionally you see this one, Cotoneaster franchetii, grown that way, but more typically as a large kind of loose open shrub. Grows multi-stemmed, kind of dome shaped, big haystack. It's evergreen to semi-evergreen. For us in a cold winter, it'll lose quite a few of its leaves. During the summer, the new growth is kind of almost a bluish green, kind of dark green with a bluish cast to it. You can still see that a little bit on here. Often takes on plum burgundy tones in the winter. Small white flowers, and then really gorgeous orange fruit, which during the winter is a real knockout on the plant. You can see birds don't love it. You know, they don't strip it down like they do some other fruits, which is a bonus for it looking ornamental in your garden. It's maybe a negative if you're trying to feed the birds. You know, I think it looks good in the garden when they don't eat it. Really easy to grow. Full sun, you'll get more flowering. You'll get a little bit denser growth, less sun, a little bit less flowering. If you get into real deep shade, it'll start going downhill and eventually kind of peter out on you. And you can kind of see where it's being more crowded on the backside. It's really not growing well. It's reaching for the sun. It wants to be in more sun. Easy to care for in terms of their growth. You can let them grow as a big haystack if you want. You can come in and remove some of the oldest branches every couple of years and rejuvenate them that way so that it comes back up. Or you can come back in and cut it back hard, cut it down to 6 or 8 inches to the ground and let it completely re-sprout that way. Either way, you're really fine with this plant. It's pretty easy. You can trim it during the season and give it a little more uniform shape, but it is a really nice kind of arching plant. If you want a tight, dense little meatball of a plant, there are probably better things to grow than this. And you can see kind of the flowers are on last year's, mostly on last year's growth, or else early spring growth. So if you do a lot of pruning every year, you're going to lose on most of those fruits, and you'll just be growing it for foliage. Okay, I'm going to talk about kind of these two plants that are flanking the pathway a little bit together. The one on this side with the really fine leaflets is Osteomeles schweriniae, which is like you see, kind of a shrubby, multi-stemmed plant, really fine pinnate leaves, small white flowers with a pinkish flush to them. Really a beautiful plant, and it ranges from just pretty deciduous to pretty evergreen. And I've seen clones growing side by side one was deciduous. When it started getting cold in the fall, it went deciduous. And then the other ones, more typical, what you see is this, which stays pretty darn evergreen until it gets very cold. Really a beautiful little shrub. Another one of those ones that if you want to keep it in check in size, if you go in and take out some of the oldest stems every few years, it'll put out new stems, and you can really keep the height down that way if you like to. I think it's beautiful, allowed to grow up a little bit larger, like that. Now we're all familiar with pyracantha, probably, the fire thorn with great big orange, red, yellow berries, getting fire blight and knocked back pretty often on many of them. Well, there's a hybrid between Osteomeles and pyracantha, which is called Pyracomeles. And that's this plant. And you can kind of see it really, it's one of those great plants that really tries to be as intermediate as possible. It's got these leaves which are pinnate, which it gets from the Osteomeles, but they really try hard to be entire leaves. They've got these like on many of them, the top 3 leaflets will be fused into one lobed leaflet. You will occasionally get leaves that are completely entire or just trifoliate, but really tries to go somewhere in between. Thankfully, it's really lost the thorns from pyracantha, so it's not a thorny plant, but it does grow as more of a tree than the Osteomeles wants to, and really you often get this pruned up more as a tree where you're growing it. Loads of white flowers in the spring. It just gets covered in flowers. Really gorgeous plant. Little clusters of kind of almost fuzzy looking small white flowers. Really a beautiful thing.
Does it get berries?
Now you ask that, I've never seen berries on here, and I'm not sure if that's me being non-observant, or have you, Chris? Have anybody, tour guides, ever noticed fruit on there? A lot of these bigeneric hybrids don't fruit well, so I'm thinking not, because I haven't noticed that, but now I'm scratching my head.
How about sun? Want sun?
Sun, yeah. Both these plants really want sun. Both the Osteomeles and the Pyracomeles want sun. And again, you can see in a pretty sunny spot, the Osteomeles has got a nice shape. There was a tree on its backside for a while, but this Pyracomeles, where it's got some some competition is really trying to get out into the sun. Really does. This is perhaps more of a curiosity than a great landscape plant, unless you have a lot of space. But the Osteomeles, you can easily keep that smaller, keeping it down to about 4 or 5 feet, and there's really a beautiful, beautiful plant in texture and then also in flower with those pinkish white flowers.
But it doesn't get any berries either, does it?
It does get some fruits. It doesn't seem to fruit very heavily unless you have several of them around. But it does get some fruit.
Are they edible?
There's nothing to them really.
Is this going to stay evergreen, or who knows?
The Pyracomely stays pretty close to evergreen. It'll start going deciduous, but it stays pretty evergreen. Okay, one more Rafflepis. And this I had to put on because this is a J.C. Ralston Arboretum introduction. Rafflepis umbellata, and you can see the kind of thicker leaf, not quite as serrate, very distinct of umbellata. It's called blueberry muffin, and it got that name. It was a little more compact than what was in the trade, not compact by today's standards of compact Rafflepis. And then the blueberry muffin is for the fruit. Whitish flowers, a little bit of pink to the flowers, and then little blue fruit. And I was looking see if there's some fruit still hanging on here, but didn't really see any. Unlike the Rosalinda and the Redbird is supposed to be, blueberry muffin is not terribly disease resistant. If you get it in a little bit too much shade, really is susceptible to diseases. If you mass it, and people really thought this was going to be a 3-foot tall plant, and so a lot of times it was planted in mass to be low, and a lot of pruning, and has some disease problems. So really not much in the trade anymore. You know, it's similar in characteristics to the other Rafflepis, so I'm not really going to go into that unless people have specific questions. Just wanted to kind of point out that kind of the evolution of a lot of these things. They have gotten much more disease-resistant Rafflepises, much more compact ones. But you know, this was one of those great stops on the way towards getting more compact and more disease-resistant. And looking at other beyond the flowers, you know, the fruits for a little bit more showy characteristics. Questions about this or any other roses or other plants out here?
Very deer friendly, right? Or deer love it?
You know, I don't know. I don't think of them as being deer, you know, ones that deer love, but you have problems with deer on them? I know a lot of rose family plants are deer do love. A lot of the plants in the rose family. I would have thought this would be one that they would like less, but I don't know at all. I haven't heard one thing about it. So you're saying they eat them?
Years in Virginia, years back. I don't know here in North. Well, here I think here they eat everything. So.
Yeah, and I didn't mention that when I was talking about rose family in general. Often, you know, we eat a lot of the fruits from rose family members. It stands to reason that deer and other critters do also like to eat rose family plants in many cases. All right, well, thank y'all all very, very much.
Thank you, Mark.
And hopefully we'll see y'all tomorrow night. Hear Ryan Contreras' talk. He's a product of North Carolina, the NC State education system. He's out from the West Coast and doing phenomenal plant breeding out there. So hope to see y'all again tomorrow, and say goodbye to Ann and thank her for all her years here.